This is Debt Free in 30, where every week we take 30 minutes and get practical advice from industry experts about personal finance and living debt-free. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
What causes people to accumulate so much debt it can sometimes lead to bankruptcy? In a lot of cases, not having a good job. According to our Joe Debtor bankruptcy study, 55% of our clients indicated that job-related issues contributed to their financial difficulties. What are job-related issues? Well, the biggest one, of course, is losing your job, and that's a very common occurrence these days. Companies get bought out or go out of business, or work dries up and you lose your job. If you have up-to-date skills, and if your skills are in demand, that's not a big problem. You find another job. But what if you've worked at the same company or same job for a long time and your skills are out of date? Or what if you have specific skills that are no longer in demand? Or what if you're new to the area or returning after a long period out of the workforce? How can you get back into the workforce? That's a question a lot of my clients ask me, and the answer is they need to pursue a second career. They need retraining to get the skills that are in demand, but there's more to it than just taking some courses. Even if you have skills, you've got to prepare a resume and submit job applications. How can you do that if you don't have access to a computer and the internet? Because let's face it, today, everything is done over the internet. It's a fact that many people today are struggling to pay bills on a lower than average income. For many of my clients, they turn to debt to survive. Upgrading your skills and finding a better job could solve this problem. But where can you get this retraining? And if you're out of work and have no money, how can you pay for retraining? Good questions, and today I've got a brand new guest with the answers, so let's get started. Who are you? Where do you work? And what do you do?
Yeah, great. Well, good morning, and thanks for having me here, Doug. I really appreciate talking about what we do. My name is David Shumaker, and I'm an employment counselor at the Working Center in downtown Kitchener.
And tell me a bit about the Working Center. What does it do?
Yeah, well, it does lots of different things. So I like to think of it as an umbrella that has lots of different pieces under it. It's been around for about 35 years in the heart of Kitchener, and it really exists to address issues of homelessness and unemployment and underemployment. So we have a number of different projects that allow people to volunteer in the community, so to belong in that way, but also to build their skills. But we also have employment help and financial help. Which is part of what I do, the employment piece, helping people with their resume, cover letters, helping them if they're not familiar with the job search process.
So very practical skills is what you're helping people with.
Yeah, and exactly, but more than just practical, at the heart of what we do is people and relationships. So we want to take people very seriously, not do for them, but walk with them as they're trying to discover the next steps of their journey.
And you're a not-for-profit agency. So explain to me what second career means.
Yeah, so second career is one of the programs that we help to offer. And it's an Ontario government program that offers people who've been laid off or who've lost their jobs through no fault of their own to retrain and get back into the workforce. And it offers, if you qualify, some living support as well as you're retraining.
And so who would typically qualify then?
Yeah, so there are a number of kind of criteria, and we can talk about that over the time.
Well, yeah. So give me the kind of the overview then. Who would be the typical person that would qualify for something like this?
Yeah, so it's broken into kind of two steps, what is called eligibility and what's called suitability. So I'll just talk about each of those. So that kind of describes the typical person. Eligibility are some basic things. Are you a Canadian citizen? Are you a permanent resident? Or are you a recognized convention refugee? But also, have you been laid off from your job, either because of your plant closed, or your department closed, or lack of work? Okay, but it also could cover other things, like you had to leave your job because of documented medical reasons, like you can no longer do your job and you have a physician's note that says that that's the case. Yeah, those would be some of the most common reasons that people leave.
So that's eligibility. And then what does suitability mean?
Yeah, great. One other piece of eligibility I forgot to mention is that second career helps with skills training, but it has to be in training in an area where there's a high demand. And we can talk about that a bit later. So those are some of the markers of eligibility. For everyone who is eligible, those kind of minimum benchmarks, not everyone then becomes suitable. And the way I like to think about it is second career, as they go through all of these applications of people who are applying for the funding, they kind of rank and they prioritize those who've been out of work longer, okay? Those who've been on their layoff job for a number of years. So there's a number of suitability markers like how long have you been unemployed, how long have you been looking for work, because those aren't necessarily the same thing. Is the job that you're going into, is it something that you need a certificate or a license for? In other words, is it regulated in the province of Ontario? Because if it is, you get more points. Think of it as a point system, and the idea is to accumulate points past a threshold that will then make you suitable for the program. They also prioritize people who have fewer skills from the get-go. For example, people who have, let's say, a high school diploma are prioritized over people who have a university degree. Okay, the idea is to help people to develop their skills and to move on to jobs for which there's a demand.
So I want to talk more about the program, but you've mentioned demand again. So it is for jobs that are in high demand.
That's right.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So the government of Canada has they do what's called labor market research, in which what they do is they do a survey and they find where are there lots of job openings, but there aren't a lot of people who are applying. So that would be in demand.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And like off the top of your head right now, and we're recording this in November of 2018, so if someone's watching this 2 years in the future, then this will be a different answer. But what kind of jobs are in high demand right now, and in particular in this area?
In this area, yeah. There are a number. And as we go through the process with people, we have a list of those. But some of the ones that come to mind are, a huge one is being a transport truck driver. That's in huge demand.
Gotcha.
And I see that in the news all the time.
And that's something that requires some training. It's not something I could just go do. You got to have a special license and that sort of thing. So you would help with the training. So, okay, so let's walk through then how the program actually works then. So, you know, you're a counselor. So how do you walk a client through the process? What sort of questions do you ask? How do they decide what they want to train in, all those kind of things. So let's say I've come to you for the first time.
Yeah.
And how is it that I've come to you? I've heard about you guys. Do you get referred from various agencies? How do people find you originally typically?
Yeah, there are two main ways. One is when people lose their job, they often go on unemployment insurance. And so at the unemployment insurance office, our counselors or counselors from other Employment Ontario agencies in the area, they go and they give a presentation about all the options of the Employment Ontario agencies, including job search, resume help, but also second career.
Gotcha.
So they would be referred to us through that encounter. And then the first step would be to go to what's called an information session, which we hold at the Working Center once a month. So people sign into that. And basically what it would do is I help facilitate that for an hour and a half. We give a presentation about here's what second career is. We go through all those things that we talked about: eligibility, suitability, the financial help that's on offer if you qualify. And that gives people kind of a first blush of what this program can offer them and what they can do with the program. So that's the first step. If they like what they hear, if they think that they qualify, then what they would do is they would set up an individual appointment with a counselor like myself or my coworkers.
And so I've gone to the initial meeting and okay, based on what I've heard, I probably qualify. I might be suitable. I don't know for sure. So I come in to meet with you.
That's right.
And then what happens at that initial meeting?
Yeah, so it's kind of a couple things. One is I just take the person very seriously where they are. To get to know them. Tell me about your story. What brought you here today? Yes, I know it's second career, but what are some of the other life forces that are in effect? So just I get a fuller picture as possible so I know how to help or how to refer them to other services that they might find helpful. But then what we do is we go through that suitability and eligibility piece to make sure that we're not wasting their time, right? And we fill out, which it's just this suitability and eligibility. We fill it out, and if they're good to go, then we move on to the next step, which is thinking about the financial pieces.
Okay, so let's say I come in and I've got a high school diploma, and I'm in pretty good health, and I'd really like to be a truck driver, and and it turns out there's a big demand for that. And so you say, okay, well, looks like you're eligible, looks like you're suitable. Now what do we do?
Yeah. So we kind of lay out kind of all the requirements. So there's lots of paperwork. It seems like a lot of paperwork, but that's just so we can keep our ducks in a row. Because part of my job and my coworker's job is to shepherd through the process so it's a successful application, because we send it then to the Ministry of Training, Colleges and Universities. They assess each of the applications that come in. But part of that is gathering a lot of information. First of all, I just help the person to know if they've really made a good decision. Okay. Is truck driving what you really want to do? So we have a conversation about that. Okay. But next is the person has to do some research on their own. Okay. So for example, they have to contact the school or schools, the training programs that they're interested in applying to. Okay. And so in some cases, actually going to the school, talking to a counselor there, one of their intake counselors or in the registrar or something like that. Also applying to the school. All right. Because obviously a second career application won't be successful if you don't get into the program.
Right. That's what this is all about. So you're kind of like the coach there.
I see myself as a coach. Yeah.
So
a shepherd. Yes.
So I've never applied for these programs. I don't know how to fill out all
That's
this
right.
paperwork. I don't know what schools are out there. I don't even know what kind of jobs maybe I'm eligible for.
Yep.
I don't even know what I'd like to do. I mean, I like doing my old job, but I've been laid off from that. So you're kind of there coaching me on, well, this, here's a few other options.
Here are some options, exactly.
Here's the paperwork that needs to be filled out. So let's say we pick that particular truck driving school in my example.
Yeah.
And so you send me off to talk to them and they say, yeah, as a matter of fact, we've got classes starting in such and such a time. And here's how the funding, the costs work and
right.
whatnot. So I come back to you and I say, oh yeah, this looks like the thing for me. How am I going to pay for it?
Yeah. So great question. So what happens is they get accepted to the program. They have a special letter that's part of our dossier, the application. And that third piece that I kind of alluded to earlier is the financial piece. So the way the second career works, and it's really quite a benefit, is there are two parts to the financial piece. One is covering the cost of tuition and books and fees itself. So that's one piece. So if you're suitable and eligible, most likely you will also have the tuition, books and fees, and other sorts of costs associated with training paid for. Okay. But then the second part of that financial piece is what is called a basic living allowance, or BLA. And what that means is if you qualify, and not everyone does, if you qualify, then through second career, you can get some of your basic living expenses covered. Things like rent or mortgage, food for your family up to a certain amount, and your utilities up to a certain amount. Other things wouldn't be covered, for example. And so people need to know this. This is one of the things that I find most often is that I try to help people to have eyes wide open when it comes to the financial piece, because second career won't cover your credit card, your debt. It won't cover your car loan or your car insurance or any other sorts of outstanding credit that you have. It can cover childcare expenses if that pertains to you.
So if someone comes in and they say, okay, obviously I need to pay the tuition and the books and the lab fees or whatever it is that this course entails, no problem, that'll be covered. But oh, by the way, because I've been unemployed for the last 6 months, I've got a bunch of debt, I've had to use my credit card and whatnot to survive, then that's not something your program can help with. That's a totally separate thing. So I think before we close the show, I'll give a few comments on what people can do who are in that situation, who've got a bunch of debt and are going through a retraining situation. So
and that would help me. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So we'll finish with that. But that's good to know then. So tuition, books, fees, and if you're eligible, basic living allowance, to cover rent, food, that sort of thing will work. So again, I keep going back to this truck driver example just because
if that's helpful, yeah.
I can actually visualize that in my head.
Yes.
So a truck driver program lasts for, I don't know how long, a couple of months, 3 months, 6 months. How long would a typical program be? Do you have any idea?
Yeah. So it's about an 8-week program.
8-week program. Okay.
Yeah.
So a couple of months.
Yeah.
So let's say it's going to start on, I don't know, February the 1st is when the program starts.
Yep.
So for those 2 months, the program will help me. Well, obviously it'll pay the tuition, the rent, and obviously my living expenses if I qualify. And then at the end of the 2-month program, well, hopefully I'm now in a position to get a job, and it was a success. What is the typical timeline then from when, and I realize this is different in every case, so I'm asking you a question you can't answer, but that's my job here, right?
Yes.
So what is the typical timeline from when I first talk to you to when I could be starting the actual program? It's not going to be one day, obviously. I mean, you have to wait till the school year starts or the next course starts. What's a typical timeline?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure there is a typical. Most of the time we try to encourage people to have as much lead time as possible because as you can imagine, leading up to especially semester beginnings, like at Conestoga or the private career colleges in September and January, they are scrambling to process as many applications as they can. So we try to encourage people to give some lead time. But it varies. I've seen people who've started planning a year out, and I've seen people who've come in with 2 weeks to spare. We try to make that happen. No guarantees. It all depends on how quickly the person can do all the research that they need to do.
But the more lead time, the better.
The more lead time, the better to really do that research well. May also want to go back and say one thing about the living expenses that might help people. If a person, there are some cases in which Second Career won't cover the BLA, the basic living allowance, and people need to know this as well as they're putting together their financial picture. One is if you're on EI, okay, and you're going to be on EI throughout the duration of your program, then EI becomes your basic living allowance.
Yeah, you're already getting it.
You're already getting it, right?
Right.
The other is if you're going into a part-time program. Part-time programs, Second Career won't cover BLA for that because the idea is that you can go to school part-time and then work part or full-time to make up those expenses.
Right. So it's help for people who really need the help.
That's exactly
makes
right.
sense. So,
and that's part of the application assessment. That's right.
And it makes sense. If I want to go to Conestoga and the course starts in September and it's now February, well, obviously I can't start till September. So there's going to be a lead time involved then. So if I've been laid off and I'm not working and I want to be retrained and the perfect program for me starts in September, but it's many months in advance of that, is there any support that your organization offers during that period before I can actually start working?
There's not direct financial support, no. Other than, it is quite tangible support, is that probably what you need is to be working. Yeah. So we can help with the job search to do kind of what's called an interim job before you start school to help defray some of those expenses for you. Yeah.
And so you've got contacts with local employers, the temp agencies, you know how the job boards work at the employment center, all that kind of stuff. So
mostly what we focus on is what's called self-presentation, right? How does does your resume really tell your story?
Yeah.
Highlighting your strengths. Does your cover letter also tell that story? Yes, we have connections with employers, but mostly we start with your own network.
Put your best foot forward.
Exactly.
Really.
Helping with interview skills and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to apply for a job today, I haven't applied for a job in, I don't know, well, at least 20 years because I've been, well, no, it's probably more like 25 years. So I don't know, like I don't have a resume that's up to date. I'm pretty sure I could wing it, but I don't know what kind of questions people ask at job interviews. So should my resume be 1 page long or 10? Should it have pictures on it? Should I do little doodles at the top? Is that what employers like? Should I put it on the internet? So, I mean, I don't know, any of these kind of things. And I consider myself to be reasonably sophisticated. So I assume there are some basic things like that, hey, we can show you some, here we've got some templates, we've got some computers you can use to prepare them. So I agree, that is a pretty tangible thing then, that you can help people through, as well as showing them what the end goal is. So the programs that I'm going to qualify for will be things like, my example of truck driver school, which is an 8-week program, some of the private colleges, if I want to become maybe a medical assistant or something like that. That's right. And then Conestoga College.
Yes.
Those would typically be 2-year programs?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I should have mentioned that earlier. Thanks for that. So it would cover 2-year programs or less.
2-year programs or less.
Yeah.
Okay.
So programs that lead to, we just talked about truck driving, which is of course 8 weeks, and there are some 6-week type programs, but all the way up to 2 years. And so it wouldn't cover university degrees. Wouldn't cover 4-year programs.
Gotcha.
But anything that leads to a certificate or a diploma. So it wouldn't cover a thing if you just want to take a class. Mm-hmm. It has to be a course that leads to some end.
So what if I haven't finished high school?
Oh, it's a good question. So it may or may not matter depending on the program the retraining program that you're interested in. When you go and approach that program, then they will do an assessment. They will say, will this person be a success in our program? Yes, no problem, even if you don't have a high school diploma. I've seen some people go through retraining and they didn't finish their high school. But in some cases, a person might say, no, you need to go back and do what's called upgrading. Okay? So you might need to work on your English a little bit more or your math skills because you're going into, let's say, a technical area. In that case, second career, if you qualify, second career can cover your BLA and your retraining for those upgrades. So in general, second career covers up to 2 years, but with upgrading, it could cover up to 3 years. If you have to go back to St. Louis, for example, in the area to finish your high school diploma and then go into your 2 years training.
Yeah, and if I'm finishing high school, then the cost of high school itself is covered anyways, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't have to pay to go to high school.
Yeah.
But the ancillary stuff would then also be covered then.
Yeah, and we'd have to look at that on an item-by-item basis. That's right.
I got you.
But thanks for drawing that out because that's an important distinction.
And so what are you seeing in the world right now? I mean, how long have you been doing exactly what you're doing at this particular job?
Yeah, so I've been at the Working Center for 3 years.
3 years, okay. Yep. So have things changed in those 3 years? Is the economy better or worse? Is it easier to find a job? Are there different kinds of jobs? Have you noticed any trends out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Definitely, I think that, as we say at work, that the labor market is actually very hungry right now. Very hungry. In other words, that there are more jobs in certain sectors than there are people who are applying for them. Keep in mind, though, that where the labor market is hungry often is in manufacturing jobs still. That's
interesting because I would think, well, everything's offshore now. Everything's made in China. There's no manufacturing. It's only service jobs here. You can only get a job working at the coffee shop, but you're saying no, in this area in particular, in the Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Guelph area.
Well, that's right. It's not what it used to be, certainly.
Yeah.
Many decades ago, or even a decade ago.
But there are
plant closures. But I'm sorry to interrupt.
But there are still lots of manufacturing jobs.
There are manufacturing jobs and also service sector jobs. It's also very hungry in that area.
And so, if it's a manufacturing job, are there specific skills that are required, or is it more, no, we need general laborers, we just need to help you present yourself to get that job?
That's right. So there are many kind of entry-level jobs in general labor, machine operator, for example, in those.
And so if my long-term goal is to go to university, so let's say I'm 40 years old,
yes,
and I was working at the same company for 20 years, they're no longer around. So maybe what I'm going to do is do some interim upgrading, maybe get do some college, take some courses, whatever. But longer term, I'd like to go on to university.
Yes.
What advice would you give me? Obviously, the second career program doesn't cover university.
That's right.
How can I set the stage for that, though, if that's what I really want to do?
No, that's a great question. One, it just starts with conversation. And we sit down with a person and talk about short, medium, and long-term goals. If you know your long-term goal is to university, okay, then we kind of reverse engineer. What do we need to get there? Is it a financial piece? Is it upgrades? You need to finish high school, or you never took math and physics in school, and now you want to go into, let's say, the healthcare field where you'll need those sorts of chemistry, biology, whatever. We just kind of reverse engineer what is it that you need to get to that long-term goal. And then just offer as many options as possible. For example, if the finances is a piece, then we think about OSAP, the Ontario Student Assistance Program, to take out loans, or working for a few years to save up money.
So again, you'd be my coach to...
That's right.
And I think just figuring out where I'm trying to get to is half the battle a lot of the time.
I really think so. Really, I mean, this is just a very human issue, right? It's not just a labor market. It's not just an economic issue.
It's real life.
Issue. It's real life. That's right. We spend a good part of our lives working. So hopefully it's work that gives us life, but also gives life to the world, right? It's not just about making money. So, just helping people to really get it to kind of plumb what are their deep desires. Are there here's a chance. Actually, unemployment can be a really chance for a person to, especially in mid-age, to really think about what is it I really have wanted to do, but I have been in kind of the grist mill
Yep.
and haven't been able to. So here's a chance.
Yeah, you have to look at it as a great opportunity.
That's right.
This is fantastic because if my company hadn't closed down, well, I'd still be there doing that job I sort of like but don't really love it. But
That's
now
right.
since I'm a free agent,
That's right.
why not take this opportunity to truly get a fresh start?
That's right.
So it's all good from that point of view.
That's
so
right.
So just to clarify then, so Second Career
Yes.
is a program of the Ontario government.
Yeah, so it's not, you had earlier said your program, but it's not our program. We're
Right.
just one of the many Employment Ontario agencies who help.
Who help support that.
That's right. That's right.
And so you get funding from donations and other agencies, and the government also helps with some of the funding?
Well, with the employment, the funding comes from the Ontario government
As part of part of this program.
That's
because you're kind of serving as the intake
That's right.
group and making sure people are qualified. So it's obviously simplifying it greatly for the government at the other end. They're getting
We hope
people
so.
who are qualified, well, as you said, eligible and suitable for it.
That's
so,
right.
So that's what works. And we've got a new government in Ontario as of earlier this year. Can't remember exactly when it was. Do you expect any changes in this program, or do you expect that no, it's going to be there for a while?
Yeah, I suspect it'll be there for a while, but technically I don't know if there are going to be changes.
You can't see the future, I understand.
Yeah. I will say, though, that it's kind of the nature of this program to change a lot anyway. So even for my coworkers who've been doing Second Career for much, much longer than I have and who I rely on because of their expertise, they feel that you never quite have a handle on it because, in a positive way, what happens is the Second Career program is responsive to the needs of people and is responsive to the needs of the labor market. So some of the rules change over time. So oftentimes we're sending an email or calling over to the Second Career office at MTCU just to clarify if this person might be a good candidate. So some of those rules and some of those requirements do change over time. So I suspect that won't change, the fact that they're changed. How the new government will affect that, I can't say.
But it's a constantly evolving program
It's a
anyways.
constantly evolving program anyway.
So that we know it will change. So what final words of advice then do you have for people who are listening who have gone through a job loss, or maybe they're actually still working but are looking for some kind of retraining? And I know you already gave one piece of advice, which was the more lead time we can have, the better.
Yes.
What other types of advice would you give people in that situation?
Yeah, so I can think of a few. One is just don't be discouraged. It can be a really discouraging time. I've been out of work before, and it can be really defeating because so much of our identity is bound up with our work. So really try to surround yourself with supports of people who love and care for you so that you don't get discouraged. But also really come in and let us help. Not only us, but also other Employment Ontario agencies in town like Agilic or YMCA or Lutherwood. There are a number of really great organizations. But the two most practical ones I think are, apart from that, are when it comes to Second Career specifically, is as you're considering it, number one, don't assume that you don't qualify. If after going through and if after hearing what I have to say, you think, oh, that doesn't apply to me, well, don't automatically make that assumption because you may. But the other piece of advice is don't assume you do qualify. Is kind of the opposite side of the coin, is that some people come in, they have all of these hopes and expectations put on this one program, and they find that they're terribly disappointed when it doesn't work out because of any number of reasons. So just have a realistic expectation, and then let's work together.
Yeah, so have an open mind about it.
Have an open mind about it, yeah.
So how can people find your organization and you if they're looking to start this process?
Yeah, so the most top-level way is just to go to ontario.ca and search for Second Career. That gives more information about the Second Career
And that's the
program.
government website?
That's the government website, that's right.
Okay.
Our website is theworkingcenter.org. Okay.
With a the in front of it?
The Working Center.
The Working Center.
And
okay.
center is CENTRE. And on that website, you'll see information on all of the different programs that we offer, not only employment related, but also volunteering and others that are really building community in the heart of Kitchener. So yeah, that's
excellent.
I can also give you a phone number if that's helpful.
Yeah, sure. Give us the phone number too.
Yeah, so it's 519-743-1151. And that'll just take you to our host desk, and then they can direct you to where you need to go.
Excellent. Well, I will put links to all of those things in the show notes. David, thanks very much for being here.
Thank you very much, Doug. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Now, you did mention about debt and how the Second Career Program doesn't cover debt. So if you've got credit card debt, if you've got a car loan, it's not going to cover that. So I've got a few tips for people who are dealing with debt while they're going through a retraining period. So number one would be, if you're able to, keep up with the minimum payments. So that will avoid future problems with your credit report. So obviously it would be great to pay off all your debt, but well, if that's not possible, then at the very least, keep up with the minimums. Secondly, I would say prioritize your debt. So, which debts are the most important if you don't have money? So clearly, paying your rent, maybe your mortgage, maybe your car payments are going to be priorities. You don't want to lose your car if you're going to need it for work. So that might be something that you prioritize. You may also want to use any grace periods that you've got. So some mortgages, for example, may allow you to skip a payment. Obviously, that's okay for a short period. It's not great for a long term, and you'll need to have a plan to get back on track after the fact. But I certainly don't recommend paying a lot of money for loan insurance. But if you've already got loan insurance that covers a job loss, well, now would be the time, obviously, to use it. Number 4 would be to talk with the people you owe money to. So get on the phone with them and say, hey, look, I'm not working right now. Can you give me a break on the interest? Can you lower my monthly payments? Can you help me? Can I defer a payment or two? They may not say yes, but if you don't ask, you definitely won't get any help with that. These are all certainly good tips for a short period of time. So as we talked about with the truck driver program that I can start in 2 months, well, maybe if I can, keep things together for a couple of months, get through the program, then I'll be fine. If it's going to be a longer period of time than that, then perhaps some of these suggestions aren't going to be as applicable. In any case, and you're probably already doing this, cut back on any unnecessary expenses. You don't want to be getting into any further debt if that's not possible. And if you're in a situation where, I'm going to go through retraining and I need to, it's going to take a period of time, but I've got all this debt and I don't want people calling and taking me to court and threatening me with wage garnishments. And of course, wage garnishments aren't a problem if you're not working. There are no wages to garnishee. But once you start working again, well, then you've got a potential problem. Great, I've got this new job, I'm making all this money, but unfortunately, a couple of my creditors got judgments against me and now they're in a position to start garnishing my wages. Well, as you said, you want to be proactive. I think it's the same with debt. You want to talk to a licensed insolvency trustee at the start of the process, not the end, because it may be possible to do something during the retraining period. For example, the answer might be, well, I'm going to be in school for the next year. Why don't I go bankrupt now, eliminate all the debts? My income is low, and because the cost of bankruptcy is based on your income, the perfect time to go bankrupt is when your income is low. Now, that may not be the correct answer. For some people, when they're not working, they don't have any money, or whatever money they have has to go to things like rent and food. So maybe a bankruptcy doesn't make sense. Why pay money to protect yourself when you don't need the protection yet? But again, by meeting with someone in debt at the start, we can say, well, maybe the answer for you is to do a bankruptcy now. Maybe the answer is to do a proposal once you're working again. Maybe there's some other option. But being proactive, I think, is always the answer. So that way you know what the plan is going to be. Because you also made the comment that there's a lot of stress. Our identity is tied up with our job. And so when I've got a whole lot of debt and I don't have a job, I'm really, really stressed out. Well, you're helping with the job piece. Okay, we've got a plan. You're not going to have a job tomorrow, but we've got this plan for retraining. There is light at the end of the tunnel. And I think it's the same with debt. We've got a plan and it may take a period of time to execute. It may be better to wait. It may be better to do something right now. But by thinking through it in advance, we can come up with the right plan. So that would be my advice for dealing with debt. So there you go. That's our show for today. We'll have a full transcript and links to everything we talked about today, including how you can find David and the Working Center here in Kitchener and similar resources for people in other areas. That'll be over at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.